Well, we can go ahead and get started. And instead of pulling up the slides first thing, while I'm looking at everybody's faces, I have a question because I've been going to this series sponsored by Shelburne Farms, and I'll talk a little bit more about Shelburne Farms in tonight's presentation. But they've got this terrific series every month. They are interviewing someone who does a farm field trip, and it might be a farmer, it might be an education staff member. The first month were actually employees from Shelburne Farms. They're up in Vermont. And in that first education session, they posed the question to all participants, what's a hands-on activity that you remember from when you were in elementary school? And I just thought it was a really great question because as I know several of us do a fair amount of programming with around environmental education, but just with hands-on activities. And in thinking about that, I'm wondering what activities stick with you, if any, from your elementary school days. And like always, nobody has to share, but I'll just kind of move around for people on the screen. And we've got some new folks tonight too. So if you'd start with sharing your name and then a hands-on activity that you remember from elementary school. And it doesn't have to be a garden or science activity, just something that was hands-on. And part of what prompted this too is after the last Sprout School session, Jenny and I were talking about Earth Day projects, and one hands-on activity that I really remember from elementary school was when we made solar ovens and we baked out of pizza boxes and we baked quesadillas with them, and it really worked. And I didn't think it was going to, but the sun actually heated the quesadilla and melted the cheese, and Domino's donated the boxes, and it was great. Um, but I'm gonna another hands-on activity, the one that I was thinking about sharing for tonight. I in my second grade classroom, we had a really dedicated parent volunteer who helped us set up a monarch way station right outside of the classroom, which was amazing. We had milkweed, we actually could see like monarch caterpillars feeding on the plants, and eventually in the summertime, I lived pretty close to my elementary school, so I could walk over and see monarch butterflies. And it was just a really early experience for me of that cemented the importance of learning outside and how much you can learn from just sitting and observing the world around you. And, now I work as an environmental educator, and I credit that experience as really helping to shape my career. So I think about that as I think about Sprout School projects, because I think I was just a mom in my classroom who was excited about it, and it really made a difference in my life. So I think these Sprout School projects are so cool because you guys touch kiddos who might end up having similar stories to mine. Um, so anyway, first on my screen for sharing hands-on activity you remember from elementary school is Daryl, I think. Hey.
So my favorite field trips in elementary school were always to the zoo.
Oh, wow.
I have a very keen interest in animals. One of my hobbies to this day is I collect roadkill and I boil the heads. And I don't have one in my, oh yeah, I do. And this is a beaver.
Wow.
And I mount them like you would taxidermy, but they're all skulls. And growing up in Oklahoma and living in Houston till COVID started and I came back to my farm in West Virginia, I have a huge collection from Texas. I even have a porpoise head. It's about 3 feet long.
Wow.
And I have a decapitation kit in my car and gloves and bags. And I pick up animals. The neighbors know I do this. One day I went outside and there was a cow head in my driveway. And in Texas, I was besides my hobby, I bred and raised lizards, and, and I volunteered at the Houston Zoo. And my degrees are in education. I will be a teacher for 58 more days, and then I retire. And I taught kids at the Houston Zoo, particularly in the overnight programs where we would host them at the zoo in tents. Houston's a little bit warmer than it is here. And we would have about 50 kids, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, 4-H, those types of things. So that instilled in me the love of nature that I still have today. And I skin dead snakes and I mount those as well on felt. And there, I am in the process of building my man cave now, where all of that will be displayed because I'm not allowed to have it in the house anywhere.
Well, that's amazing. Yeah, how those field trips to the zoo sparked a lifelong passion for nature and wildlife. That's terrific. My aunt worked at the zoo when I was a kid, which was great because I grew up in North Carolina. I went to elementary school in North Carolina, and my aunt could get us passes to the zoo, which was awesome. We could go just about every year. And I really fell in love with flamingos, which they're still my favorite animal from seeing the flamingos at the
Oh,
zoo
to this
as a
day.
kid.
Two-bill storks are my favorite. They're the ugliest birds you've ever seen, but they're huge and I love them.
That's awesome. Thanks, Daryl. All right.
Yep.
Next on my screen is Noelle.
Hi. I can remember in kindergarten, we made butter out of the little carton of cream, and we all got a chance to shake it, and then we got to taste the butter on crackers. Um, but for me, remembering something from as far back as kindergarten, that's a long time, you guys. That's a
Yeah,
long time ago.
absolutely. And that's neat with the work that you do now around,
Hmm.
trying new foods and cooking with foods. And
Yeah.
yeah, no, I remember we visited, I grew up in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and
Hmm.
Salem piece of it, they have this place called Old Salem. That's a lot like Colonial Williamsburg, where they preserve the traditions of the past. And we made butter there, and I thought it was so cool. And we made regular butter and we made apple butter. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing. I thought it was. I remember coming home to my mom and I'm like, we need to do this all the time. And then I think it kind of got lost, but yeah, I remember doing that too. That's awesome. Okay, next up, I've got Jenny.
Yeah, coming to you live from the guest house instead of my house. But I think the one that sticks out for me, so there's like all of the like garden slash insane adventures I had with my grandparents that definitely like shaped what I'm doing now. But um do you guys remember the science experiment that was putting the egg in the flask? Like you set something on fire, you put it in the thing, and then you set the egg on top and it pops down in
No, I
because
didn't
it
do
lowers
that
the
one.
oh, we'll have to do it at the office.
Okay,
Um,
okay, looking forward to
yeah,
it.
yeah. Because so that part is really easy, and then to get it out, you actually have to turn the flask over and blow, and then the egg pops back out in your face because it's an air pressure difference thing.
Whoa.
And so yeah, yeah. And so I became obsessed with that experiment because those of you that heard about my obsession with airplanes on Saturday, that's how planes fly, and that is how they describe how planes fly to like a 5-year-old. And so I became obsessed with that experiment, and then I like demanded a set of those flasks for Christmas like the next year, and then I just started like it was my party trick no matter what. It was like 8-year-old Jenny's party trick, and then 9-year-old Jenny's party trick, and then like 25-year-old Jenny's party trick. Like it became a thing.
And now you're in your 40s, and it's still going to be your party trick because I'm very excited to see it at the
I was
office.
gonna say it is kind of still my party trick if I ever find the supplies for it. Yeah.
That's great. Okay, next up is Sherry.
Unfortunately, I do not have a party trick. Um, I do remember being fascinated when I learned that potatoes could conduct electricity. And the whole magnet thing, and I just thought that that was just the most amazing thing. And growing up on a mostly a horse farm, but my mom grew up on a farm, so we would spend like Saturday, and this is I'm dating myself, but we would spend like Saturday morning cartoons with a big a glass peanut butter Jif jar. Like, God, I really am ancient. And we would do butter. Like we would just like roll, my sister and I, like we just take turns like rolling the Jif jar while watching cartoons. And like when I was older, like I just want to be able to pack a lunch like with like a normal kid and have like regular store-bought bread and regular store-bought jelly instead of homemade everything. And of course, if I could only have that back today.
Yeah.
But so I feel like my house was just a huge science experiment. But yeah, the potatoes were pretty cool.
That's great. Okay, next I've got Danielle.
Hello. Sorry, I was trying to hush the dog. You're probably going to hear him on a protest for for bedtime. He's tired of being in the office at this point. He's done with it. But I did not. I I don't know if I just don't remember or if my elementary school was just not nearly as cool as everybody else's. But the only thing that I remember that kind of stuck with me that was hands-on in elementary school was I had an art teacher at one point that taught us all how to make a rose out of Play-Doh. And I think I used that same design for roses on cakes and roses in ribbons and roses with whatever I'm making a rose for whatever. I that has definitely carried with me. I still use that trick.
That's great. I went through a big duct tape phase in middle school. Like duct tape started releasing like fashion duct tape. It was everyone in sixth grade was obsessed with fashion duct tape when I was in sixth grade. Anyway, they had like owls on it. They had chevron print. They had so many different types of duct tape. And our favorite thing to do was to make roses. And
Oh, that's awesome. We have way better duct tape today than we did when I was growing up.
yeah. I most of the time I think duct tape and I think silver, but like I started. This is my origins in entrepreneurship. I had all these duct tapes because I would ask for them for Christmas and my birthday, and then I would have people bring me binders, and then they would pay me to wrap their binders in colorful duct tape.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Oh, it was great. And yeah, that and the roses and the wallets and all. It makes me so happy that you still use your rose
I
technique.
do. I do still use my rose technique. And yeah, I think I can't remember what grade I was in when I did that class, but I think it's probably the legitimate like the only thing that really stands in memory to me from elementary school, which was entirely too long ago.
Great, thanks for sharing. All right, next we've got Jackie.
I know that we did a lot of cool stuff in elementary school, but nothing is coming to mind right now as far as interesting things. One thing that I do remember that was hands-on was the leaf collections that we had to do as kids, and that was always something that stands out in my mind because I'm from Tennessee originally, so that's the one time that I got to spend a lot of time with my grandfather because he knew all about all the trees in the area, and he had a solution for everything, and there was a magic potion for every ailment that you could possibly have. And I really enjoyed that time with him to be able to go around and collect these leaves and learn all about these different kinds of trees. So I think if I had to pick like off the cuff something that really stood out in my mind, it would be like the leaf collection. Even now, like my husband, he's from California originally, and I can walk through the woods and like tell him, "Oh, this is a maple tree, or this is this kind of tree, or this kind of tree," and he'd be like, "How do you know that?" And I still remember from my leaf collection. So that's kind of cool.
Oh, that's really cool. It makes my heart so happy because one of the projects we've been working on at Future Generations over the last couple months is funded by a grant from the Appalachian Forest National Heritage Area. And so there are quite a few activities centered around leaf collection as a way to connect to the forests and connect to the land. So, yeah, it's great to hear that that activity had an impact on you, and so cool that you got to do it with your grandfather as well. That's great.
That's really nice. I like that.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much. And tonight for our Sprout School content, I was hoping that we'd have a guest speaker so you guys wouldn't have to hear me keep talking again. But it's another night of me talking and sharing a few resources. And then our next Sprout School session will have Dana Lester, who works for the West Virginia nutrition program. And then the session after that, all people that you know well. Andy Pence is coming to talk about the role of nutrition director, and Andy's done a lot of fantastic work around sourcing local foods and what that looks like in a West Virginia school system. So I'm excited that he's going to come share his insights. But for now, tonight, we are kind of continuing our sessions on curriculum in the gardens, curriculum in the forests. This moves into managing school gardens. But as we talk about managing school gardens, their school gardens can look like a lot of different things. So this is a few resources that we've found that we like, but please jump in anytime if you have other resources that you want to share. If you have specific school garden stories, we love to hear those. We love to hear those too. I will just go ahead and share my screen. Give me 1 second. Okay, there we go. Okay, actually, before we go here, quick recap, because over the weekend we did have our youth garden gathering in Charleston. Thank you so much. Noelle made it, which was terrific. And yeah, just a great day of programming. Started with some fun, get to know you activities. I loved Jenny rebranded Two Truths and a Lie. If you all have ever played that before, as Two Truths and a Funny, because we don't want to teach kids how to lie, which I like. At summer camp, we called it Two Truths and a Lie, but I think I'm going to switch to Two Truths and a Funny. So good way to get to know the folks that we were hanging out with. And then there was a session on grant writing, basically grants 101, what you need to know to get a grant, fill out a grant. And then there was a partnership panel, and that's the photo that you see in the top left corner of this slide. We had Darrell Miller from Keep Your Faith Corporation. And then on the right here is Dr. Barbara Liedl, who works as a plant biologist at West Virginia State University and has also been a tremendous advocate for engaging young people and college students in careers in agriculture. And she's also served for the last few years. This program, Sprout School, is funded by Northeast SARE, and she has helped review grants for Northeast SARE. So a great person to think about both writing grants and also the back end of what it looks like to review grants. So we were really grateful to have her expertise. And then, as always, there were some fun activities to end the day. So here you have Grace in the bottom left-hand corner, and she's holding up two little salt shakers, not because they're filled with seasoning, but Jenny had this fun activity where you put sand and seeds in a little container, and then you shake them out to garden rather than trying to place seeds really carefully, because that can be tough with small hands. So I loved that idea. And then this is Alex to the right here, who is making homemade dip. And this connects to managing school gardens, because here we just have spices that Jenny bought at Walmart. But if you were growing an herb garden with a group of students, you could grind up those herbs and then add them to plain yogurt to make a dip. And here we've got carrots to dip in there. And there have been, yeah, lots of studies that show that when you give kids agency in trying new things, then that helps them be more willing to try them. So I thought that was a great activity. And then my personal favorite, because I love puns so much, were these punny valentines, where you take an element from nature, as you can see on the left here, a leaf or a stick on the right, and then you make a Valentine's pun, and then you give it to someone you love. So yeah, I thought that was really fun. Really just a tremendous day overall. Okay, well, back to managing school gardens. So here we have pulled 10 best practices for school community gardens, and these best practices come from Vermont Feed. So Vermont Feed stands for Food Education Every Day. And earlier I mentioned the farm field trip program that I've been attending over the last couple months, and that comes from Shelburne Farms. And so Vermont Feed is a collaboration between the Northeast Organic Farming Association of Vermont and Shelburne Farms. And the foundational program of Vermont Feed is the Farm to School Institute. And it's a year-long opportunity for folks who are interested in implementing farm to school programs and their schools to come together and get resources for doing that. Each team has like 4 to 7 members, and it has to have somebody from administration. There has to be a teacher. There has to be school nutrition food service, so that you're implementing a program that comes with a really strong team foundation. And Jenny often describes sprouts. Yeah, exactly. um, exactly the comment that Jenny just put in the chat, where describes sprouts. Vermont Feed is a great, kind of a bigger version of Sprout School. And if you're interested in implementing some kind of farm to school program at your school, yeah, Feed could be a cool program to participate in. And I know last year one of our Sprout School participants applied to Feed but did not get accepted, but they gave her great comments back on her proposal. And I think she was thinking about applying again. Jenny, have you heard an update on that? Do you happen to know if Lydia has applied for Vermont Feed again?
So she has not,
Okay.
but actually Lydia and I are scheming to maybe make a West Virginia version of it that's a little more intense than Sprout School, that people can do as like a Sprout School Part 2.
Ooh, love that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's so exciting. And other states have taken this up as well. Pennsylvania now runs something that's Vermont Feed-esque. So, yeah, I could totally see something like this thriving in West Virginia. That's awesome. So, if you get on Vermont Feed's website, they have so many tremendous resources. They have a curriculum that's all about nature and food and community, that's targeted at early elementary school. And then they have another resource that's like over 120 pages. I've downloaded a copy of this one. These resources are available for free. If you just want like the PDF virtual download, you can get that on Vermont Feed's website. But the one that I have that I'd be happy to share with you guys is called Connecting Classrooms, Cafeterias, and Communities. And they've written down several of the things that they talk about in the Farm to School Institute. And yeah, it's basically a guidebook of those practices that they share in the institute. So big document encompasses a lot of different elements of the farm to school program, but one of them is school gardens. So what they found in I think Vermont Feed was started in 2000. So now, yeah, their 25 years of work is that school gardens work well if they are in a very visible site that is next to the school and has good soil, very important. I know we've got a lot of gardeners in this group, so you all already know the importance of good, yeah, good soil. Somewhere that's permanent. Vermont Feed is all about organic gardening. I think that whatever gardening practices work the best for your site is what I think is great. Yeah, diversify your crops. This one's a big one. 5, curriculum integration, working with the teachers to think about how you can do lessons in the garden as a part of the school day. I think back to the story that I shared at the beginning of tonight's session about getting to go into the monarch garden, and in second grade you're really developing those early literacy skills. So one of the things that we did is just sit in the garden and write about what you're seeing, and that's a great practice in connecting observations to to the written word. So yeah, just something like that. It doesn't necessarily, I think often we think farm to school and we think yes, it's garden education and think connections to science, but there can be great connections to literacy as well, and history too. That's the emphasis of the National Children's and Youth Garden Symposium, which will happen this July, and that's sponsored by the American Horticultural Society. They're really focused on science and history in the garden this year, so I'm excited to hear more from folks from around the country on how they incorporate history in their gardens. So they've got in the rest of their 10 tips, keeping things organized, and we'll go into a little bit more specifics about that in just a minute. Support from the school. So that is a key part of the Sprout School project as well. That's why we have you guys do Learning Lab 2, where you're thinking about your dream team, is just making sure that everybody's on the same page before you start a project. Commitment, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as well when it comes to working with volunteers. Oh, involving the community. Yeah, I'm thinking about, I guess this was 2 Sprout School sessions ago. It's the beginning of January that we talked about school garden curricula, and something that I really want to do year is, or maybe not this year, but sometime soon, is think about having a community member who's worked in gardens for a long time come sit in a school garden and kind of share their experiences with gardening over the years. And that came from that was an activity from Cornell's school garden programming that I really hope to incorporate, and celebrate the awesomeness of all the people working on the project. That's a great one always. So moving into managing school gardens, this kind of connects to the 10 best practices, the communication piece, the commitment piece, the keeping, everyone on the same page piece of all those tips. Some kind of standard method of communication. When I worked with volunteers in a garden in my previous job, that form of communication was just email, but I know some people have used Google Calendar to coordinate tasks and times. I feel like we're talking to the people who are interested in working on the garden and seeing what communication outlets they regularly use. Pretty straightforward. And then creating a schedule of chores. And I think this works really well because something like weeding, I mean, you come in and do that once a week, whereas something like watering, you need to do that and well, maybe not daily, but checking on the plants daily. So there are different tasks that require different levels of time commitments so that everybody can help with the garden. And I also think about ways to help with the garden, and this kind of gets into our next slide, which is volunteer roles and recruitment, that don't necessarily mean needing to be in the garden all that frequently. I think marketing can be a helpful task. Planning an event to expose the school community to the garden or produce that comes from the garden can also be, yeah, great roles for folks who want to be involved. Um, and then this last one, when things don't go right, go left. I mean, all of us have worked with kids at one point or another and worked in gardens, and both kids and gardens can sometimes be unpredictable. That's part of why I love the work that we do so much. And when I was preparing for tonight's Sprout School session, I came across this great story from a woman who's getting a school garden started and really simple. She just wanted to plant a few sunflowers along the edge of the building that her kids would see when they look out the window. And so they decided to grow these sunflowers. They're watching them grow for months. They're about to bloom. It's so exciting. And lo and behold, something came along and just munched off all the tops of the heads of the sunflowers. And the kids were feeling pretty sad, and but the teacher was great. He was like, okay, we'll just watch and see what happens. And what happened is that the sunflowers sprouted back multiple heads, four heads that were smaller than the original one. And then the teacher could adapt that into a message about resilience and the tenacity of the plants, just like we can be resilient and tenacious. So I really loved that. Plus, I think as a kid, I would have loved to see a sunflower grow four heads because, yeah, you guys already heard that colored duct tape was big when I was in middle school. The Percy Jackson series was really big when I was in elementary school. And the premise of those books is is a demigod. So his dad is Poseidon, god of the sea, and he gets launched into great adventures through Greek mythology. And at one point, encounters a hydra. And if you've never heard of a hydra, if you chop off one head, then it grows another one. And yeah, I think I would have thought of those sunflowers as the hydra sunflowers. So all of this is to say, we're just getting kids outside in the garden. There are so many, even if things don't go as planned, there are so many cool lessons that can come out of that for sure. And I know you guys all know this too because you're proposing awesome hands-on Sprout School activities, some centered around gardening. Okay, so yeah, we basically buzzed through this, but as I said at the beginning of tonight's presentation. There's so much that goes into managing school gardens. So part of what we want to do through this presentation is share resources that we like. And many states have school garden networks like Maine. And if you get on the Maine School Garden Network website, they've got volunteer hours logs and sample volunteer instructions for all of these different roles that you see listed on this site. So I'll send out these slides tomorrow, and you guys can click on that link and go to those resources if they're at all helpful to you guys. There's also a school garden program framework that comes from the U.S. Botanical Garden, where they have many of the same resources that you find on the Maine School Garden Network. So I'll send that one out too. The point is, if you're just getting started with forming a school garden, there are lots of great resources that exist already. Yeah, engaging families, that kind of goes back to having some kind of event, having a volunteer work day, whatever works best. And then other pieces, cultivating community volunteers. Yeah, like this list of folks to think about. And yeah, I mean, I guess anybody who's worked with volunteers, I feel like, yeah, it's just important to know going into it what level of commitment the volunteer is looking for. Are they going to be there every week at the same time or multiple times a week, every week? Or is this something that they're just more interested in being involved with tangentially? And either is fine. And all these resources that I'll send out tomorrow, yeah, have good tips for both types of volunteers. Um, So then this is going to be the only the only like month by month list I'm going to pull up for managing a school garden, and this comes from the Evanston Environmental Organization. This was a slideshow that we attended the National Children's and Youth Garden Symposium last summer, which I mentioned earlier, that's sponsored by the American Horticultural Society. And there's a parent volunteer that's a member of this Evanston Environmental Organization, and she coordinates the school garden. And this is her list of how to do it with a team of parent volunteers month by month, what you need to do. So I can send out those slides as well. But I also want to just pause here. And as you can see, this has a lot of work going on in the summer, and her situation was pretty cool because they had a big team of volunteers who lived close to the school, and they were excited to come by and weed water and harvest during the summer to keep the produce going. But there are different activities where, like, you could start herbs in the spring and munch them before the school year is done, and then not have to maintain a garden in the summer. Um, or in the fall. Yeah. I love that tip from Jenny. Plant sweet potatoes and just walk away. I think people get understandably so intimidated by work in the summer, but there are crops that you can plant that don't require a lot of maintenance. Um, and then in her presentation, she walks month by month and gives more details about what to do to get your garden going. So it's just a great resource. Yeah, if you're thinking about planning a school garden. Jenny, I know you've done a lot of work around school gardenings and managing school produce. Any other tips that you want to share with folks?
Yeah, I think one of the easiest things to do if you can like write a little grant for it is like, or even get like community to donate for it, is just like employing two middle school or high school kids that are sort of reliable to just water things every day. Particularly if you've got high tunnels and you don't have irrigation in your high tunnels. I mean, we finally put irrigation in our high tunnels in like year 3. Is super helpful. Also, a lot of them will do it just for volunteer hours. A lot of them will do it just because they like it. So that's a really easy way to kind of make sure things survive for the summer. The other thing is like if you can in some areas where you have like a significant master gardeners aren't always the solution, but they can be the solution. And I've worked with many master gardener groups that are not the solution. I have. But when they're there and they're great, they're great. Is what I will say. I think so employing like a volunteer group, grandparents as caregivers make great groups of people to engage with to kind of just help. And often they have a lot of garden knowledge anyways. So they might tell you how to grow your tomato and why it looks wrong and like 17 different ways to trellis your beans. But, you know, in the meantime, they're also trellising your beans for you. So it works. And then I think the other piece to this is like Margaret already hit on it, but like intentionally planning to not grow in the summer is a really good choice if you are very low capacity. So let's say it's like you trying to do a school garden by yourself. I would, the first time out, plan to be done by early June. Like harvest the last crop with the kids, no matter what, pull everything so the beds are clean and ready for the fall. And just like it's okay. You don't have to be in full production is for like all 9 months that you can produce things in West Virginia. Like it's okay. It's also okay to like if you don't want to start with a giant school garden, it's okay to start with like I love like the half wine barrels. You can put a lot of things in a half wine barrel. You can put an entire pizza garden in a half wine barrel. You can put an entire herb garden in a half wine barrel. You can put a whole entire dinosaur garden in a half wine barrel. And it's really, those are far easier to take care of. So, like, think about what's easiest to take care of if you're just getting started and kind of what you can manage and who your reliable team is. Because if you're the only reliable person with your team, like, you know, it doesn't mean that they're not involved, but if they're not going to be the ones to show up to like do the things, then like only bite off what you can chew.
Well said. And the dinosaur garden is new for me. What's a dinosaur
Oh,
garden?
oh, sorry. Way back in the day. No, we used to take half. This is really cute. It's really cute to do with younger kids. I would love to see like a project proposal come in with this. It's also very plug and play. Like having kids tell you a theme that they want to make their garden. Like maybe you have teams of four, and it works great for like pre-K through five. It also works great for middle school and great for high school. And like they get more involved as you go up. But like you tell them you're like, here's your space. And so maybe it's a half wine barrel, maybe it's like half a box or whatnot. And you like help them build out a themed garden. And so we had a large number of dinosaur gardens at one point when I was working with a bunch of preschoolers. And what it meant was like they wanted the ferns, but then we also snuck tomatoes in and we stuck carrots in because the fronds look sort of like ferns and all kinds of stuff. And then they got to play it like we have little dinosaur figures that they got to like play in their garden with once it took off. Other interesting themes, we had a princess garden that was interesting. It was very sparkly, is what I will say. And then we had
Because of the decorations?
yeah, yeah. Well, the decorations, but then also like we planted some flowers that have like a sheen to them too, right? So like you can totally kind
Yeah.
of theme it out. And then we had oh, my favorite was we had a group of they were insane, but we had this was actually the preschoolers at Linwood. This was
Oh,
okay, the kids that are now Mia and Anna when they were in preschool.
oh, wow.
We did they wanted to do a like girl power superhero garden because that preschool was like five little girls were the like 4 and 5 year old class. And so we like took Barbies and put capes on them and like all of that. And then we like it was crazy. But it was a lot of fun. So yeah, there's a bunch of different ones. The like little finger skateboards were really popular when I was like doing a lot of extension work with directly with kids. And so a lot of the middle school boys were like, can we design a garden that also is a skate park, right? We had a lot of that. So it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. And it's a great way to like get kids engaged, not create something that's hard to manage.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we were talking about earlier with the making dip activity, just giving the kids the choice of like you can create this, and then I feel like that those choices help get kids really invested in things.
Yeah, and like with preschoolers, we would be like, here's your four choices, like, and you
Yeah,
have a theme,
smart,
and then
smart.
you have a set plant that goes, like, you have a set planting that goes with that. But then once they get into high school, you're like, all right, you're gonna design your own thing, and it like it just keeps them engaged when sometimes, and I mean, I did a lot of work in a lot of communities of color, and sometimes going in and being like, we're going to plant a bunch of vegetables and we're going to plant a bunch of peas has some interesting cultural connotations, particularly given what's going on in the world. And so it was a way to kind of engage a much wider audience than just like the kids who really wanted to grow the tomatoes.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, I'm gonna pause here, and just oh, this is awesome. Yeah, Daryl, we're about to wrap up, so that works fine. Yeah, for your class, we're so glad you're here. Um, yeah, and I'll just pause here before I go to the announcement slide to ask if anybody has questions about managing volunteers or managing a school garden or any tips and tricks that anyone wants to share as well. Okay. Well, then we will go to the announcements slide. Topics of, I don't know where I copied that and pasted it from, but topics for week 2 of Sprout School, which is not Tuesday, April 16th, but instead Tuesday, February 18th, will be talking to Dana Lester about fun nutrition activities to do with kids. And I'll update that in the slides I send out tomorrow. And yeah, thank you so much. I know a few of you have turned in Learning Lab 3. We are working on reviewing them and we'll get feedback to you guys as soon as we can. If you need help completing any of the learning labs, my February until we get to that last week of February is pretty flexible. So please shoot me an email and we can set up a time to chat. Happy to fill out the learning labs together, whatever would be helpful to you guys. I am always a
Awesome. I might
resource.
be reaching out to you for sure.
Yeah.
So I literally just found out, not found out, but I've decided what my project's going to be about 3 days ago. So I've got a few questions, looking for some guidance from you. And then, yeah, so I'll be able to dive into the learning labs. I feel like such a slacker, but really, I just joined. I'm a little bit late, but
Oh,
but
not a slacker at all. Yeah. These all work on, yeah, everyone's own timeline. So that's exciting that you have a project idea. Congrats.
yeah, yeah. Well, I've got an idea. Well, I'm gonna pass it by you and get some advice on um how to administer the educational piece of it. So, but I'm excited for it. I'll shoot you an email for sure,
Yeah,
though.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Sounds great.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. And we'll go ahead and say good night and goodbye, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks, you too. Bye.